Welcome back. A high-ranking Bronx NYPD deputy inspector is being accused of sexually abusing an officer under his command. 44-year-old Keith Walton of the 49th Precinct is now facing felony charges after a fellow cop came forward with claims of sexual abuse. However, this case has not stopped him or his supporters from standing behind him. Walton is popular for being known as a part of a group of officers who presented Tyrone Lowe with a $5,000 check after the tragic loss of his mother and father last December. Now, here to further discuss the charges against Walton, we welcome now attorney Troy A. Smith, and Troy joins us here. Troy, good to have you.
Good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, as we talk about this case, obviously a case that has drawn a lot of attention across New York City, when you have this high-ranking official being accused of sexual abuse. First of all, let's go through the facts of the case and let our viewers know.
Well, from what I understand, Deputy Inspector Walton, like you said, is a high-ranking NYPD officer. One of his subordinates, the allegation is that he was making sexual advances towards her, sexually assaulted her, and she's making claims in that regard against him. Right.
Allegedly, he's saying to grope the female officer, calling her into his office, forcing her hand twice onto his crotch through his clothes, and the unidentified woman later confronted her boss 2 days after the unwanted advance and had a tape-recorded conversation where he said, "I thought that we had something going on."
Well, that's my understanding, that it was tape recorded, and whether it was consensual or wasn't consensual, you know, it's just bad. Another black mark for the NYPD. You know, being a criminal defense attorney, I'm also a lawyer for the United States Army, and I deal with. I liken it to that, where you have commanders and subordinates, and you know, you can't have a deputy inspector making sexual advances or getting involved in relationships with a subordinate officer.
What kind of possible defense could he possibly be using that could go in his favor?
Well, depending on you know, what's on the recording, if it is in fact recorded, you know, a false allegation. It's my understanding the alleged victim has brought a lawsuit against him, as well as the New York City and the NYPD for a great deal of money. That could be a motive
$35 million federal lawsuit right now.
It's a pretty nice amount of money.
Yeah, and when you talk about $35 million, that's a huge amount of money for sexual abuse. But in addition to that, though, she also, and the person is Michelle Hernandez, the plaintiff says in the Manhattan Federal Court that while heading to the 49th Precinct, that she was disciplined unfairly for refusing to follow summons writings and arrest quotas. And she also claims that Walton discriminated against her for speaking out about a 2014 incident, which she said that she was told to squash a summons after pulling over Councilwoman Vanessa Gibson for using a cell phone while driving.
Well, obviously, if those are all true, it doesn't look good for Deputy Inspector Walton. However, as a criminal defense attorney, I would look at pursuing an angle of, you know, this person has a motive to fabricate, to save her job, and this is the reason that she's making these allegations now, because she failed to follow proper protocols within her the department.
So legally speaking, what happens from here? So we've got this case. How does it go? How does it play out in court? What goes on from here?
He's been arraigned in Bronx Supreme Court. He's been charged with felony allegations. He's pled not guilty. There's likely going to be motion practice that will happen. Motions to whether or not there were statements made or whatever, or assuming that there's going to be grand jury action on the case, you know, whether or not the procedures in the grand jury were followed properly. And ultimately, there's going to be a hearing and potentially a trial, unless there's going to be some kind of plea discussions.
When you talk about a trial, if it goes to trial, how long are you talking? How long can we be talking for this?
It varies. Generally speaking, you know, we're probably talking close to a year, if I had to, you know, give my best guess.
Mm-hmm. But more than likely, usually with situations like this, we usually find plea bargains involved.
It depends. It depends on the offer in this case. You know, if an individual such as the deputy inspector that has many years on the NYPD, he's got a pension at stake. You know, his reputation is at stake. You know, it's possible that he could you know, decide to take this to trial. It depends on what the evidence is against him. You know, we're reading what's in the newspaper, but the evidence also comes from, you know, the evidence comes from what the prosecution is going to provide to the defense and, you know, be able to prove at trial.
And for us here in the borough of the Bronx, of course, another situation involving the NYPD police. What does this do for police-community relations?
It doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help. It only you know, further widens the gap in relations. You know, the police are in a public official, and they need to, at a time where the reputation of the NYPD needs to be improved. It's just another black eye on them at this time, and it's unfortunate. Yeah, it is unfortunate. Troy Smith, attorney at law, talking about the charges against Keith Walton, who's NYPD inspector who's accused of sexually abusing one of his female officers. We'll continue to bring you the details surrounding this, and we'll continue to update you. Troy, thanks so much for being with us. Thank you so much for having me.
All righty, good thing. Troy Smith here with us. Listen, we've got to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll have a conversation with our political commentator and the Bronx activist who invited Fidel Castro into the Bronx, I should say. They're going to have an in-depth discussion on Fidel Castro's leadership in Cuba. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back right after this.